choosing the theme based on how easy it is to customize its appearance. Okay, so what do I mean by customizing its appearance? And what I'm referring to here in this case then is changing font sizes and colors, changing backgrounds with background images and colors, changing what displays, for example, post images or thumbnails, or post meta, for example, the date, or displaying the date or author or category, stuff like that. Changing the order and arrangement of design elements, for example, putting the menu above or below the header, putting two menus side by side, moving main elements around a little bit on the page. That's what I mean by customizing the appearance. There is a WordPress way for customizing the appearance of a site. And the first aspect of that is the child theme design options. We can see that actually if we come over here to this is my training site for teaching people how to build a professional services website using Genesis, and this is using the Agency 2.0 theme, which they've now retired, but I think is still an excellent theme to use. But if you go to the dashboard and we'll take a look at the theme options, you'll see that the theme options here are similar across most child themes. And so, for example, under appearance, if we look at, well, first we look at Genesis theme settings. You have a limited choice of colors, which I'm going to show you in a moment. You can set up a default layout. You can add a few extras to the navigation. You can enable or disable breadcrumbs and stuff like that. But it is primarily, it's a fairly limited number of options. So if right now it's showing red. I should just go back to that, for example. So in this case, we're using the red color, and that's what is making this red link and this red link. If we change that red to, say, green, save the settings, refresh it. Okay. That's the extent to which this changes. It doesn't really make a big change in the appearance. And this is indicative of the kind of changes that you can make using theme options in the traditional WordPress way. WordPress also suggests plugins as a way of customizing the appearance. And there are two examples of that. One of them is this one dynamic that I mentioned earlier. Another one is my plugin. I have a plugin for Genesis called the BYOB Genesis Child Theme Editor, and this plugin provides an editor interface for customizing the child theme without hacking the child theme. So there are a couple of options for using the WordPress way with Genesis and plugins. And besides child theme design options and plugins, you can customize by simply creating your own child theme. Now, if you're gonna create your own child theme, and you're just doing it from an appearance standpoint, that requires a fairly extensive amount of CSS knowledge, right? And that's the way it was intended, right? Way back when child themes were first imagined, it was imagined that you would use it to change some CSS on a site. And so you'd use the regular theme and then overlay the child theme CSS on top of it. Now, Genesis has taken that whole concept to a whole nother level, and there's quite a bit more added functionality associated with a child theme than just different CSS. But the WordPress way for making those kinds of changes is to create your own child theme. Now, however, you cannot have a child theme for a child theme. So if you already have a child theme and you want to change that somewhat, you're left with hacking the child theme. Now, hacking is sort of a disparaging way of saying you're going to change the child theme or edit the child theme. You're going to physically change the child theme files. And that's actually the default way of customizing Genesis. If you look at Genesis tutorials, or if you look on the forum and look at the things that they suggest you do, they're often saying, well, open up your functions PHP file and put this in it, or, add this code to your footer PHP, or add this code to your header PHP, or, open up your style CSS file and add this code. All of that involves changing the underlying code base. And the downside of that, or the problem with that, is that anytime you upgrade that child theme, it automatically removes all those changes, right? It won't save. The update process overwrites all those changes. And so if you find you want to use them again, then you have to go back and make them again to the updated child theme. So really, this is why child themes are actually intended to be used as is, because there's no way for you to change a child theme using the WordPress way without hacking it, unless you're using a plugin like Dynamic or My Child Theme Editor. And that kind of hacking requires a fairly extensive knowledge of CSS. Now, the Thesis way of customizing the appearance comes in a similar set of ways. The first one is built-in customization. So if we come over and take a look at this is my Carta skin on a WordPress on Thesis 2.1, and we can make some pretty significant changes to the way this looks based on the Thesis's skin design, skin content, and skin display options. I'm just going to show you skin design for just a second. Whereas on Genesis you could pick red, green, or blue, here you can come along to the Thesis color scale and say, well, you got kind of like this aquamarine color here. Save your design options, refresh the screen, and the whole color scheme has changed considerably once you've done that, right? And in a fairly harmonious way. And then if there's something that you want to really change up, well, you can, change individual colors in a thing like this very simply. That wasn't a good choice, but with the ability comes the ability to make it look ugly, right? So there is that, but you can say to yourself, okay, well, let's see, I think I want my link hover color not to be this blue, but I'm going to choose a contrasting color. I'll make it rose. Right, and so it's got some pretty compelling, very simple design options that can be used to really change the way this works and the way this looks, right? So fairly simply. And then there's an awful lot of additional stuff like that where you can change font sizes and font families, and for all kinds of different things, headlines and the site title, and you can change up the styling of widget areas. There's all kinds of different ways in which you can change the appearance simply by coming in and changing colors like that. These kinds of changes are well, it's a fairly extensive opportunity for you to make changes like this here in a Thesis child theme. The same thing is true with skin content, right? There are ways for you to, for example, in this case, I've got featured pages, and so you can mess around with which pages you want to add, that kind of stuff. So there's quite a bit of ways in which you can customize and change the appearance from inside the dashboard without actually having to resort to using any code. On top of that, of course, there are different skins, right? Different skins have different sets of options, and so not only can you not only can you change these design options like we've just done, but you can change those design options in the context of different skins and have, significantly different looking websites. Thesis has built in this whole custom CSS system where, you can just write your own custom CSS right here in the and it's syntax highlighted and things like that. It's got some code completion features and it's very easy to play with CSS because of the custom CSS editor that Thesis has associated with it. Whenever you make changes like this, it never changes the underlying skin. So you can always update the skin and never lose your changes. And this is, I think, the great benefit for people who are customizing, the great benefit of Thesis over Genesis, and the great benefit over the Thesis way, the great benefit of the Thesis way over the WordPress way, because you aren't actually making changes to the underlying code base. All you're doing is saving options and overlaying those options on the top of the existing code. So what can you do with Genesis without knowing CSS? Let's see. What can you do with Genesis without knowing CSS? Well, you can, as I showed you, change a very limited number of colors and change layout and stuff like that. Dynamic actually significantly increases the number of things you can change. So you can change font styles and colors. There are several things that you can change in a child theme as long as you're using that Genesis extender or that dynamic extender plugin. But without that, you saw really the extent of the stylistic changes that we could make in Genesis, and that is, well, you can upload your own header image, you can upload a background image, you can set a background color, and then you can pick from a color scheme. That's pretty much it. So it's a fairly limited number of changes that you can make to Genesis without knowing any CSS. What can you do with Thesis without knowing any CSS? Well, in large part, that answer is dependent on the skin. Most professional skins make extensive use of the Thesis skin design options, like I showed you there. And you can go from changing a simple set of colors and fonts to changing the widths of columns and the arrangement of columns to fairly significant changes in backgrounds and background images and that kind of stuff. There's a ton of customization that you can do in Thesis without knowing any CSS. But that is often dependent upon the skin. Skins that don't implement those skin design options and the Thesis color scheme and stuff like that, then the only changes you can make are by using custom CSS. Some skins are designed more specifically to avoid using custom CSS, and some skins are designed so that you have to use custom CSS. So Thesis Classic has a much more limited set of choices than, say, does the personified skin. And many changes in Thesis Classic beyond the basic ones will require you to use that custom CSS section and write your own CSS.